I've been getting a lot of questions from totally beginner guitar players asking me sort of advice on how to improve fast. And that's kind of a hard question. I could probably come up with like how I teach like the first month. But as I've gotten better at teaching guitar, I don't really have like cookie cutter lessons anymore. I kind of just sense what type of person the person is and what they like, and then just try to get them there as fast as possible. So like some people are more analytical and they like to think about things. So those types of people tend to do better if we read notes and do music theory. Some type of people are better at like hands-on things, and they sort of learn by doing without thinking. So those types of people tend to do better if you just start learning songs right away. Or like some people, like they can only learn if I just show them something. They just look at how I do it and they just do it. And then actually what's kind of weird is the most rare are people who actually just learn by ear. So I've only had a few students who just could like hear stuff and just like get it. And most of them had been playing piano since they were young. So I think that's an advantage if you start playing piano when you're young. Like for me, it's taken like 10 years where it probably took like 4 years where I could really trust my ear. Because I was always listening to a lot of music when I was young. But I'm more of a visual person. Like it's easy for me to imagine stuff very clearly, visual things. But I have a pretty good ear now. It just took a while. But like I've noticed like some of my students have like who play piano since they were like 4. Like their ears were just amazing, and I think that's just because your brain processes things differently when you're young. But one thing I would really want to know about if I was starting guitar, and I usually actually teach this the first lesson, and I reinforce it the first month I'm teaching. The first thing you need to know the string names, of course. So the way I teach it is every bad girl deserves an elephant. So a lot of people have different little mnemonic ways to remember this. But I like this one because elephant is the fat string. Because it's easy to get confused. So every bad girl deserves an elephant. So you need to know the string name. So E, B, G, D, A, E. So first thing, even if you write it down, you really have to know the string names. Because the guitar is kind of insane. It's just so complex the way it's laid out. It takes a long time to understand it. But if you learn the string names right away, it starts to really help. So one more time. E, B, G, D, A, E. But the point of this lesson isn't just to name the string names, because most people can figure that out. What's kind of harder to figure out is how to use that knowledge to then find any note you want on the guitar. So the easiest way to start doing this without getting too complicated is you just have to memorize 2 facts. B, C, and E, F are always next to each other. So I usually make my students write this down. I'll just write it so you can see it. And I make them say it like a ton of times. B, C, E, F. So you just want to memorize this. It's not hard to memorize. It just takes like saying it a number of times and then thinking about it maybe for a week. B, C, E, F. So if you memorize this fact, B, C, E, F, and I have people write it down just like that. You just have to memorize this, B, C, E, F. If you know the string names and you memorize this fact, B, C, E, F, then you can find any note on the guitar, any natural note. So a natural note is not a sharp or a flat, because I'm not going to talk about sharps or flats because it doesn't matter. If you can't find, once you can find the natural notes, finding the sharps and flats is easy. And actually, when I visualize the guitar fretboard, I usually see the natural notes I mean, at this point, sometimes I see the different sharps, but it's easier just to see the natural notes in general in your head, or to think about the natural notes first. There's a few keys that I play in all the time where that's not true, but usually I find it's a little easier to just think like that. So natural notes, the natural notes are A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So that's what I'm going to show you how to find, are just the natural notes. So sharps or flats would be like B flat, or D sharp. Like those would be two examples of non-natural notes that are on the side. So this is not going to talk about that. But the only thing you need to memorize is B, C, E, F. And then once you know the string names and you memorize B, C, E, F, you can find any note on the guitar. So here's how you do it. You start on E, and you know that B, C, and E, F are the only notes that are directly next to each other. Otherwise, you have to skip. So let me show you what that means, because it's easier just to see it. So this is E, this top string. Well, E and F, if you memorize the facts, B, C, E, F are the only notes that are directly next to each other. So you have to consider this a note. So directly next to it, to the right, is F. So here's E, F. The next note after F is G, but we need to skip to get to it. So G, you have to skip. The music alphabet stops at G and it goes back to A. So after G is going to come A, but since it's not B, C, E, F, then you're going to skip to A. So now we're on the 5th fret. So after A will come B. Since it's not B, C, E, F, then you skip. Now here's B. So next to B is always C, directly next to it. So that was 7th fret to 8th fret. Then, since we're on C, the next note should be D, because we're going up the alphabet, the music alphabet. So C, so B, C, E, F, so it's not one of those pairs. So here's C. So the next one is D, we had to skip. Now we're on D, since it's not B, C, E, F, you have to skip. So there's the 12th fret. And if you did it right, when you get to the 12th fret, which usually has 2 dots, you can kind of see that. Usually has some sort of marking, or like on my guitar it even has that like abalone thing right there. When you get to the 12th fret, it should be the same as the open string if you did it right. E, E. Because every bad girl deserves an elephant. EBGDAE. Those are the same as the open strings. So then you can go down to the next string. So this string is B, every bad. And you can just start going to the right. So you treat this as a note, B. So one note to the right is C. Because directly next to B is C. So it's helpful to see this again. B, C, E, F, you gotta memorize that. So those notes are always directly next to each other. And usually at that point, once my student kind of gets it, I'll even sometimes draw out the music alphabet, because a lot of times that can be kind of confusing. So I'll do that real fast. And if you write stuff yourself, you learn like 10 times faster. Like I force my students to write tabs out. I force them to write a lot of things, because it really does speed up the learning. So I'm drawing the music alphabet, and I'm going to put a box around B, C, E, F. So if you look right there, first of all, notice the music alphabet, I started on G, because it actually doesn't matter where you start, it just goes forever. We just assigned letters from the English alphabet, but I mean other countries, they don't call them that. Like in a lot of countries they call it do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. They don't even use letters, they use that system, so they don't even understand. If you try to explain major scale with letters, they don't know what you're talking about. So it's just arbitrary letters, like we could have picked other things. So it's important not to get confused. It doesn't go past G, there's no H. But if you look at that picture, B, C, E, F are always next to each other. So those are a half step apart, the others are a whole step apart. But basically you just have to know when you're supposed to skip when you're going to the right, and when they're directly next to each other. So usually I'll have my students draw this at this point, just to kind of reinforce what's going on. And these are the natural notes. So we're going to do the same thing on the B string. So you go on the B string. So pretend this is a note, like touching on here. It's going to be a little confusing because it's open, but pretend that you have to hold this down because the nut does the work of what your finger would have to do. B. So C is always next to B. Now we're on C, so you're going to have to skip to D. And then you have to skip from D to E. And next to E is always F. There's a half step. Now we're on F. So you got to skip to G. Whoops. So there's G on the 8th fret. Then to go from G to A, because that's the next note after G. Since it's not B, C, E, F, you have to skip. Now we're on A. Since it's not B, C, E, F, you have to skip. There's B, so you could keep going past, if you did it right, B, B. Past B would be C. Then another whole step to D. Another one to E, F. So now I'm going to do it kind of fast. Then I just usually just show them, because it's good just to kind of see it. E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E. B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. And then at that point, I have them start doing it themselves. So we'll do it on one more string, and then you can try on the other ones yourself. You just got to remember, every bad girl deserves an elephant. So then you know where to start from. And you have to memorize the fact B, C, E, F are the only notes that are next to each other. One other thing I usually show my students at this point is E, F. So I show them all the E, Fs. Here's E, F, E, F, E, F, E, F, E, F. You just kind of go around. It's always a half step. E, F, E, F. Or B, C. You could do it here. B, C, B, C, B, C, B, C. They're always a half step apart. But like if you look at like G, A, G, A. There's a whole step. G, A, G, A, G, A. See, I'm always skipping. Or let's say we had C, D. C, D, C, D. See, it's always a whole step. So we'll do one more string, the G string. So here's G. The third string, G. Second fret is A. From A to B, it's not B, C, E, F, so you gotta skip. Now we're on B, so next to B is always C. Now we're on C on the 5th fret, so we gotta skip to D. D to E, you gotta skip. E to F. E and F are always next to each other. So now I'm on F on 10th fret, and then the last one to get to G, you gotta skip. And that's it. So once you know this open strings, and you remember B, C, E, F, you can find any note on the guitar. And then usually I do at the very end of that, maybe not the first lesson, but then I'll show them real quick what's going on in between. But I don't have them memorize that because it just kind of clouds your mind when you're first learning. So I'll write these notes in. So what I'm going to do is write in the sharps and flats, which if you looked at a piano, those are the black keys. So what we just played were the white keys on a piano. Sometimes it's easier to understand guitar by thinking about the piano. And actually when I was learning guitar, to learn music theory, I had to actually get a keyboard out and like think about stuff on a piano, because it just didn't. The guitar is a really bizarre instrument in terms of how it sort of works, whereas the piano is like super simple, and you could teach a kid music theory on piano because it's so much more intuitive. So if you look in between, those are the notes we skip. So G sharp, A flat, A sharp, B flat, C sharp, D flat, D sharp, E flat, F sharp, G flat. And the reason why I put them in boxes is because they're the same note. So they just have two names. So in between like C sharp, in between C and D would be a black key on a piano, and C sharp, D flat. Or in between A and B was A sharp, B flat. So real quick, so let's say we write here, this note was F, E, F, and here's G. So this is F sharp or G flat. But when you're learning this, I'm not going to even say more about it because it's good to know what's in between. But you don't want to learn the guitar like this. E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B. If you try to have all that in your head, it's just too much information. It's much better to really know where the natural notes are or be able to find it. So if someone asks you, where is B flat? You could go E, F, G, A, B, and then you go one to the left to find B flat. Because otherwise what happens, you have to go E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, or B flat, and you have to go up by half steps. It's too slow. And also later, like, it's just easier to have the natural notes kind of in your mind of where they are, and then to sharpen flat stuff. So anyways, that's it. Hopefully that kind of that'll help some total beginners, because once you understand how to find any note you need on the guitar, it just kind of builds a lot of confidence. So I hope that was helpful. Bye.